What's up, peeps? My guest today is Jordan Mendoza. He's a sales and training professional with over 25 years experience, currently working for a national property management firm as their training and development manager. He's the host of the Blaze Your Own Trail podcast, and he's an MBTI certified practitioner. We're going to learn all about that today. And we're also going to learn about Jordan, who is a father of five. So he's got some stories to tell, and I'm really excited to get into it. Jordan, thanks for being on, man.
Hey, Frank, it's my pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. So before we get into this, one of the things I love to do is really to just start off and let you connect with the audience and give us a day in the life of Jordan, who you are and what makes you tick.
Awesome. Well, currently a day in the life, as Frank mentioned, I'm a father of five. Our youngest is a month old. So a current day in the life for me is not a lot of sleep, right? But trying to figure out how to muster up the energy to be a guest on an awesome show like this and do my full-time corporate role and host a podcast, right? So I'm hustling and I'm grinding. I look at this pandemic as an opportunity, not as a there are terrible things, right? I don't want to, say that there aren't terrible things that have happened, but I really look at it as a big opportunity to use the extra time that you're saving. Like for me, I'm not driving to the office. I get to come down into my basement, into a quiet place and work. And so that saves me probably 4 hours a day. So I choose to invest that 4 hours into growing as a person, investing in my family, and really trying to make that time useful. And so if you're right now listening to this episode and you have thought that COVID has maybe been a negative situation, shift your perspective a little bit and say, what can I do with this extra time that I have?
Yeah, that's awesome. I like to talk about an attitude of gratitude. And I think, there are terrible things going on across the nation and across the globe, but really looking at, okay, what do I have to be thankful for? And how do I turn some of this darkness into light? So love that attitude. And that's why you're on today, because I know that you're going to share a lot of that with the audience. So how did you get started? How did you get to where you are today? I know you got a pretty interesting backstory. So I'd love to share that with the audience and let them connect that way, because I feel like that's really important. Your journey hasn't been a straight line. You've had some ups and downs. So give us some context there to how you got to be who you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not the person I am today without the two people that have been influential in my life. And that was my mom, God rest her soul. She lived to be 54 years old, but her journey, almost didn't even begin. It's a very crazy story. In 1957, Los Angeles, California, my grandmother was actually raped. Terrible thing, terrible situation to happen. In January of 1958, my mom was born, and she was born with one lung. And I'm not sure how much you know about the 50s, but the technology was nowhere near where it is today. And so they essentially told my grandmother, your daughter will probably live to be 18. She definitely won't be able to have any kids. And when I tell you my mom was a fighter, she was a fighter. She lived to be 54 years old. And these were a hard fought 54 years with oxygen, right? Because she couldn't breathe without that. And, dealing with different ailments and going in and out of the hospital throughout that time. But she also ended up having five boys. So she took that, that hand that she was dealt, and she said, you know what? This is what you gave me, but I'm going to flip the script and I'm going to live my life and be positive. She taught me how to be empathetic. She taught me about sports. If you can, Frank can see behind me, I'm a big sports fan. That all came from mom. She figured out ways to get us involved. She was the side hustle queen before side hustles existed. She would go to bingo. She would go to the dog races. She did anything to make sure she could provide for us. And so that was really mom, and that was a big influence on me. My dad was actually a Philippine immigrant, came to the Philippines, in the early 80s, but he had grew up, working in the rice fields. And, I don't know if you've been to a rice field, Frank, but they're very itchy. You're standing in a lot of mud, and his only helper was a caribou. right? That could actually help him do this work. And so he had a hard fought journey, went to the Philippine army, and then he went to became a seaman, and he sailed around the world on ships, painting ships. And one day he decided to come to the U.S. for the American dream. Got a job at a landscaping company, worked there a couple years, and now he's had his business for over 40 years. Right. I mean, this is just crazy. And so when I met him, unfortunately, it didn't happen until I was 12. So that's tough, right? When you don't meet, a person, and especially someone that's from a different country, right? So you don't know about your heritage or your ancestry. So, flying out to meet him for the first time when I was 12, it was interesting. I lived in Oregon, he lived in DC, and here I am at 12 years old going across the country. Of course, TSA didn't exist back then, right? It wasn't, you didn't have to go through all the security, so you could literally walk people to the gate. I'm sure you remember that, Frank.
Oh yeah.
Walking right into the airport. It was awesome. But I remember landing and getting there and meeting my dad for the first time, and really being interested in learning about what he does. And I remember like waking up the next day and not seeing him because he was already out to work, right? And that's something that set the tone for me when it came to work. And that summer I worked my tail off. I had to do transplanting, weeding. I had to cut people's lawns, and it really taught me how to work hard. And so you combine those two people, and that's where a lot of my personality comes from. I really care about the impact on people. I'm big into sports. I like to work hard. I like to get in the mud, and that's just a little bit about my story. But Frank, one thing I wanted to share with your audience, because I'm a big believer that for one, our stories aren't for us. They're for us to share with others in hopes that they would be inspired to maybe think about something differently or do something differently. And for two, one thing that I've learned in my short 39 years of life is that adversity actually gives us strength. Right? Adversity actually helps strengthen us for the battles that we don't even know we're going to face down the road. And so I want to share with you, Frank, three pivotal moments, right? These are three pivotal things that happened to me between fourth grade and 19 years old. And I hope that these stories will give people inspiration to know that you can really battle anything that you want to if you put your mind to it. So fourth grade picnic, Frank, Portland, Oregon, Pier Park. I remember it like it was yesterday. We were having a fourth grade end of the year celebration. I don't know why. I could see fifth grade, right? I could see eighth grade, but I don't know why we did it in fourth grade. But we're at the park, we're playing baseball. I remember I was up to bat. I was a big Kirby Puckett fan back in the day. I loved his stance, right, when he was hitting the ball. I remember swinging. I remember spinning around, right, like they do in the movies. And the bat flies under a big Douglas fir tree. So I go over, I pick up the bat, I stand up, and there is a beehive on top of my head. And I'm talking like the cartoon style honeycomb, beehive on my head. So I'm running, Frank. I'm running towards people. There's kids running away from me. I'm doing somersaults and handsprings. I'm trying to get these bees off of me. I start running towards teachers. Some of them run. Not very good teachers, Frank. I get to the good teachers. They actually dump coolers on top of my head, and they just start picking bees off of me. Ended up getting stung 53 times.
Whoa.
Now listen, if I was allergic, my friend, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
For sure.
But yeah, so that was pivotal moment number one. And pivotal moment number two happened in seventh grade. We had moved, folks. We grew up poor. We were really poor. I thought that the pink lunch tickets, everybody had them. I didn't find out till later on, till about high school, that meant we didn't have any money. Because I still got the square pizza like the other guys did. Right, mine was just free. But yeah, so we were on welfare, food stamps. And we moved between birth and 14 at least 14 times. So it's funny because I've moved a lot as I've been older, and I thought about it. I was like, that's why I feel okay, because it was a natural thing. We were moving. So we just moved to a new town. I begged my mom. I said, Mom, I don't want to go to a new school. I've gone to school with these guys since kindergarten. Like, at least let me do my seventh grade year here. So I convinced her. She went on the bus route with me. I had to take 2 public buses to school just for seventh grade. So she took the route with me one day. The bus it stopped at a 7-Eleven. From the 7-Eleven, I caught a different bus, and that would take me to school. And so I was on that route one day. It was, in the fall. I'm sitting there at the 7-Eleven, and I did one routine, Frank. This is the only routine I had. I would walk in 7-Eleven. I would say hi to Rose, the lady that worked there. I would go to the Mortal Kombat 2 arcade game, and I would play. And I would be Raiden. Sometimes I'd be Baraka, and I'd just be jamming out against the computer. It was just me and the game. And when one day I was playing the game, I hear the chimes, the bells of the store ring, and somebody walks in. It was a male's voice that shouted, "Hey, Daniel!" And of course, I'm Jordan. I'm not Daniel, so I didn't respond. I'm just playing my game. And all of a sudden, I feel my body being lifted. I'm thrown against the Terminator 2 pinball machine next door. I'm getting punched by a male officer in my sides and my ribs. I get thrown on the ground. I get handcuffed, and I get taken to a police car. The lady Rosa in the store is yelling. She's like, "That's his name's Jordan. I know his mom." They're like, "You be quiet. We're gonna arrest you too." It was insanity. And my saving grace, Frank, is I told the officer, I said, "Listen, my name is Jordan Mendoza. Please check my jacket pocket. I have my homework in there." It was probably the only one of the only days I did my homework, Frank. But I remember I had it in my right pocket of my jacket. When I tell you, Frank, the officer reached his hand in that pocket, pulled out the homework, and his face, brother, he looked like he saw a ghost because he knew he had messed up. They were looking for a Hispanic runaway, right? For one, I'm not Hispanic. I know that I look at, a lot of people confuse me with it just because of my complexion and the way that I look. And, my dad's from the Philippines. Spain colonized there for several hundreds of years. So there's a chance there's, Spanish blood in my lineage, but I'm not Hispanic. But it was a racially profiled thing. It was a false arrest. And that was pivotal moment number 2. Pivotal moment number 3, fast forward to 19 years old. I had been doing sales. I'd started sales at 14. I've been grinding, doing all these different business-to-business sales jobs. And I was working for a company in California. We were going to open a satellite office in New Jersey. And so we, get our cars together. We got a caravan of 3 cars. We take the scenic route. We're young. We go into Salt Lake City, into Phoenix and Vegas, and we make our way up to I-80, which crosses the country. It goes through Wyoming. And we're on this drive, Frank, and it's late. And I'm in the cool truck. And I'll tell you here in a little bit why it was the cool truck. But I'm in a truck. There's 2 other cars behind us. My buddy, Jeremy, was driving. Well, he at some point, I had fallen asleep already, but he falls asleep at the wheel. He wakes up, he overcorrects and hits the gas instead of the brake. We start sliding at 70 miles an hour, and the truck just starts flipping. And I wake up during the slide, and I remember putting my hands up, and I just remember yelling, "Holy like 3 times. And then boom, the truck came to a land. Our buddy that was driving, not in the vehicle. He had gotten ejected, and he landed 25 yards on the other side of the highway. Our only saving grace was that some off-duty EMTs, they were coming from a conference. They had happened to see us all on the side of the road, and they had called in the ambulance. And our buddy got life flighted. He was looking bad, but didn't look like he was going to make it. I didn't even realize I was hurt. There was so much adrenaline, but I reached on my right leg. I had a cut a fist deep. My hand actually went in my leg. It was nasty. And I had this terrible smell of iron. If you've ever smelled a lot of blood before, it's very ironous with the scent. And I remember, getting rushed to the hospital and yelling at the guys because they were driving so fast, but they didn't know the extent of the injuries. And then I remember waking up the next day, and my buddy Branderis is sitting next to me. He was in one of the other cars. And I remember saying to him, "Hey, listen, I'm glad it was me. I'm glad it wasn't you." And the reason why that's so powerful is Branderis and I got into an argument, a heated battle somewhere in Utah. We were battling on who's going to get to ride in the green truck, who's going to get to ride in the cool truck. And I remember winning that battle. And I'm glad that I did, man, because I think about that moment a lot. And what if Branderis was in the truck? And what if he wasn't sitting the way I was sitting? And what if he would have had his seatbelt on? I didn't. Maybe he wouldn't have made it. So maybe I was supposed to be there at that moment, And I love to share these stories, Frank, because these are pivotal moments that for me, it really has opened my eyes to what real adversity is, because I tell you, Frank, I've been through those three things and I still don't feel like I've faced the adversity that my mom faced.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives me a beautiful, beautiful perspective, and lens to look at life through.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, just you threw a lot at us there, which was really helpful because it kind of understands. I worked with I don't know if you know Mary Henderson. She's active on LinkedIn. I worked with Mary, and Mary helped me kind of break down things. And one of the things she said was that, kind of birth to 20, there's things that go on in that time frame that kind of shape who you are from 20 to where you're at today. So I think you kind of touching on those three instances there where we're, like, as you mentioned, pivotal in your life. I think that's, those things there, as you look back on them, and also as you self-reflect, it's like these things help, we're part of what shaped you today. I mean, obviously having a pretty awesome mom, your mom did what it took. So you learned from your mom that she had kind of the odds stacked against her, but she provided, and she made it work no matter what. And our moms are kind of similar in that fashion. And then you got your dad, who, like you said, you didn't meet him until you were a little older, but that you did get that time with him. You did get to relationship build. So it wasn't all, sometimes people are on the flip side of it where like, oh, my dad, he's not in my life, or the negativity. You had that gap there, had the chance to connect with him, really built, and you look back and obviously have some respect for your dad there, who built the business. Again, another person who did what it takes to build in something that he has on his own. So it's impossible to not take the parenting aspect of what you've been exposed to, and then the other things that have gone on in your life, and say, hey, you have faced the adversity. Yeah, when people look at it, like, wow, this dude's an overcomer, and you have the positivity too. You're using this not as a crutch, but to your advantage. And I think that that's something that people really need to understand, is that we all have this, backstory. We all have things we went through. Some of it is, some of it's worse than others. But I think it's what we do and how we take of it. And we use these things as kind of a springboard or a launching pad to say, okay, it happened, but how do I move forward, and how do I keep making progress? And you've done that. So really, really, really powerful stuff there, and an awesome story to who you are today. Your mother, I mean, you guys had a basketball team. You had a team of 5 there, and now was it your aspiration? Were you and your wife like, we're going to have 5 kids? I mean, that's pretty cool. You've also got 5 of your own.
Yeah, you know what? It's so when I actually met my wife, another crazy story. She wasn't supposed to have kids. My wife wasn't. Just from some things that happened when she was younger, as the doctors told her, like, you're not gonna be able to have kids. So when we started dating at first, and having some conversations, she was like, yeah, I'm not, and I was like, I'd really love to have him, but if you can't, I care about you, and so and then all of a sudden, she gets pregnant, and I remember being like, wait a minute, wait a second, didn't you tell me, like, I'm glad that we're having a kid, but didn't you tell me? And she's like, no, that's what's supposed to happen. So I feel like all of our kids are miracle babies, right? Like, when you're told your whole life you're not going to be able to have kids, and all of a sudden you fast forward 15 years later, you've had 5. So that right there, my friends, is a story in itself. And kids are a blessing, because we learn so much from them, all of my kids are so different in their personalities, and it's fun being able to see how they grow, and not just from like day to day, but like week to week. I think is big, right? Especially when they're in school and they're soaking up so much information, and then sometimes they come home and they want to share too much of it, right? And as a parent, you have to really put on that hat and pay attention, because some of the things that they tell us, I think, teach us lessons that we need to really learn.
Let me ask you this here. So you've helped share your story there. You've got 5 kids. I think your youngest now is going on 5 weeks, and you got a son that's 15.
Yep.
Okay. And then you're going to be 40 this year, or did you just turn 39 this year?
I'm going to be 40 in February. Yep.
Okay, so you'll
Yep.
be coming up on 40.
Coming up on 40.
You built a successful career now with a national organization, and really have a lot of responsibility working with other individuals. You're certified Myers-Briggs practitioner, and then also just having the backstory that you have, and really being the positive person that you are. What advice would you give to someone tuning in? Oh, I want to throw in the fact that you've built a successful career, and you didn't graduate. You graduated high school, but you didn't go to college. So I feel like I want to point that out there, because a lot of people are like, you have a degree, you have some kind of specialty. That's might be why you've had the success or why you overcome. So like to just shine on that for a minute, because I feel like there are people, if you didn't graduate, if you didn't go to college, or you started college wasn't for you, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So you've shown the way that you can have that progress. What advice would you give to anyone tuning in that might be stuck in a rut, might be, kind of the woe is me mentality, or think that the deck is stacked against them, there's no overcoming it?
Yeah, so my honest advice is find out what your strengths are, because that's what I knew. I didn't want to go to college like before I even finished high school. I just knew that wasn't for me, because I didn't enjoy learning in that way. I prefer learning through experience. So I knew that I always wanted to do sales and eventually business, and then eventually become an entrepreneur. Like I just knew that from a young age, and I knew that I would probably have to work harder in some aspects, but also getting good at sales, my experience plus my sales ability, like ability to market myself, would probably also give me an advantage over people that, maybe had degrees, right? Because, you put in experience into the mix, right? If I have 5 years experience in sales and someone's a fresh graduate, would you want someone that's 5 years experience, like in the field, hearing no's all day long and being successful at it, or someone that has never heard the word no in their life? So if you're listening and you don't have a degree, and that that's not the route you go, I'm going to recommend a book. Okay. It's called Clifton Strengths. It used to be Strengths Finders 2.0. This book is amazing. You take an assessment in the very back of the book, you cut it open, you'll go to the website, you'll take an assessment, and it's going to populate your top 5 strengths. Okay. And it's going to give you a breakdown on what each of these strengths means, and how this can actually, if used the right way, can be used to your advantage, right? Because everybody has strengths and we all have weaknesses. But if you actually focus on your weaknesses, your strengths aren't getting the attention that they need, right? And so your strengths can actually start to fade away a little bit. But if you actually focus on the areas that you're good at, not the areas that you're weak, right? And I know this is contrary to popular belief in most parents, right? Like, you got an F, like let's focus on the F. But what if you focused on the A, right? What if you focused on the grades that your kids are good at? Or what if you focused on the areas that you have strengths in, and you built those up, and then you went into the field that those would be most complementary to? Does that make sense? So I think investing in your strengths, finding out what they are, being self-aware of what your strengths are, is going to definitely help you, especially if you know that maybe the college route isn't for you.
Yeah, and I'm with you there, and I highly recommend I took it's different now, but the Clifton Strengths 34. I'm an achiever, ideation, learner, command, and input. So those are my 5 top strengths there. So big, and I'm that type of person too. I'm a big fan of investing in yourself and betting on yourself. So that's solid advice there, and totally couldn't agree more. Um, so love the advice there. Again, you work with a lot of people. You do the Myers-Briggs. You get to work kind of really closely with individuals as doing that. But over time, you working in with Gables and doing the training that you do. You probably see a lot of different spectrums of personality. And then maybe help people realize some things that, through interacting with them and being a leader, kind of where they might be things they might be misconceptions. So I feel like if you can share maybe a common misconception or something where you see, I see people thinking this all the time, and if I could change it, I would, because I feel like there's a whatever that impediment that might be with people. So if there is something that maybe you see where you're like, hey, if I could change this, if Jordan had the power to, pop and there it goes, it'd be changed. What might that be?
I really think it's the perception that, you know, you are what you are, right? And you can't be flexible, because that's the thing with Myers-Briggs. Even as a certified practitioner, I tell people all the time, you are way more than your type, right? Your type is a small percentage of
Yeah.
what you are, and it's a great tool to use, right? To give yourself a baseline and to take that introspective look at yourself, right? Because for me, and I'll break down what all these mean. So I am an ENFP, right? So that means I prefer extroversion, right? I get my energy from the outer world versus an introvert that gets their energy from the internal world, right? Introverts prefer that they would rather sit at home and read a book than go out and grab some coffee, right? So those are kind of the two differences. So the N it actually is an I, but they use it as an N. It's intuition. They're using the N from the word intuition. So I'm an intuitive type. So I like to think big picture. I think outside of the box. I can't, I don't like to be pigeonholed in as far as my thoughts are concerned. I like to have that creativity. And then stands for feeling. And so as feelers, we care about the impact on people. It's why I was really terrible at firing somebody, because I was like, man, like, how are they going to feed their family? What are they going to do next for money? And versus the opposite of that of a thinker, which would be more like, well, they didn't do their job. They should have followed the rules, and then they wouldn't have got fired. Right. So that's the F. And then the P, right? The P is perceiving, and perceiving types, we're just very spontaneous. I could today be like, oh, I want to go to Canada and just start driving there, and I'd be fine even if I didn't have the backpack packed. Like I could just go. And then on the opposite end of that, the judgers are the people that they need things in order. They need a plan. They need things to be systematic and scheduled,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, I think when you can understand these principles about you, right? These natural inborn tendencies. And again, these are preferences. These are how we prefer to show up in the world. But it doesn't mean we get to show up that way all the time. Because Frank, and you'll get this, if you're married, sometimes you got to be flexible, right? Sometimes I've got to be less spontaneous and more on the schedule, because I prefer to stay married, right? So you have to be able to flex. And so that's the biggest thing for me, is wishing more people knew that, listen, it's okay to flex.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is flexing hard? Absolutely, because you're stepping outside your comfort zone. But is flexing necessary? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Hey, since you kind of went on that and brought that up, I feel like the investment in yourself, the finding out really about who you are, because people do struggle with it. I struggled with it back when and that's why I actually hired, I don't know if, again, someone from LinkedIn, Kurt Mercadante, I hired years ago. And he's a Gallup Strengths certified coach. I found him and was like, hey, man, I struggle with my strengths and really kind of maximizing that. And it was great to go through the whole exercise, because I'm like, all right, this all makes sense. This is why I do these things that I do. This is why I act the way that I do, because finding out about yourself, sometimes you're like, you think that you and you kind of understand things, but really digging deep into the reasoning of why you act that way and kind of understanding it. So love how, and you mentioned it perfectly. You have these traits, you have these strengths, but also some of the ways and how you act are going to be different based on the circumstance that you're in. And like you said, hey, I want to stay married. So these, I'm not going to just go drop everything I want to do and go skydiving today. So again, there's just some of those things in there that you do adapt to. And I feel like you and I, whether I read it somewhere or saw it in a post or content or something along the ways, but I'm someone who's like, it's easy to be me. Like this is Frank. You're getting Frank, no matter what. I'm the guy that you see, whether it's behind a camera, on audio, in person. This is me, and I feel like that's people people don't get that. People feel like I got to be a certain person here, I got to be a certain person here, and I got to be a certain person here, and you don't. And I feel like you talked about how you act, how you present yourself. Those things are extremely important, and I think you're kind of a good. Obviously, you're a good people reader, so I think you could sniff out BS pretty easily. So how important is it, and hearing it from, instead of me trying to, explain it for you, how important do you think it is for people to just show up and be them? Because I feel like that's, again, something else that people are like, I go to work and I'm this person, and I come home and I'm that person. And maybe they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, honestly, Frank, I think that's the unlock, right? That's the unlock for you to be the happiest, right? Because I was on a podcast recently, and I told him, I said, listen, it's very hard to be somebody else. I think I've tried it as a teenager, like I try to be this cool guy or try to be this or that, and it's exhausting. Like it's an exhausting place to be. And being yourself, it's actually easy. Because you right? You know how you show up. And like you said, like I'm that same way. If you come see me at Kroger or see me at the gym or at the park playing basketball, I'm the same exact person. And that's the only way I know how to be, right? Once I figured out that like you have to show up as your real self, because guess what? People relate to you. They're not going to relate to you if you show up this way on this podcast. The next podcast, you show up another. You know what I'm saying? Like you're all these different people. Like, no, you have to be that same person 24 hours a day.
So 2020, we were talking before we went live here, not only about your son. Your 2020 has been a year that he'll look back and remember. I think 2020 is a year we're all going to look back and remember. And this is going to be, a lot has changed all across the world, been eye-opening for so many people, and there's been changes and adapting and pivoting and all these things. So one of my favorite parts of the show is really to give my guests a chance to pontificate and glimpse out into the future. And from your perspective, where are we going in 5, maybe even 10 years from now? Where do you see us going, and how do you see things changing?
Honestly, Frank, I see in 5 to 10 years, me waking up, going into my living room and saying, TV, what's my schedule like today? And my TV coming on and it popping up all of the Zoom meetings that I have. And then me going, downstairs into my gym, working out, coming upstairs, and then doing my Zoom meetings from my living room. Right. Like, and then, I think that, voice is going to skyrocket, right? Voice is it's in a lot of places now, but I think in the next 5 or 10 years, we're going to see a big lift in it. And someone's going to get smart and upload the Zoom app natively into TVs, right? So that we can start having these meetings from the largest screen in our house versus the smallest screen in our house. If you follow the trends and you have watched some of the movies that have given us a depiction of the future, that's coming. I don't think we're too far away from some of those things happening.
Yeah, I agree. When we were younger, and I'm 42, so you're not far behind me. But growing up and watching the Jetsons, I feel like they had flying cars and all this stuff, and it's like that's going to be us. My dad, my mom used to say, when you're older, when you're our age, there's things are going to be different, and things are different. But I feel like the last 5 to 7 years have been exponentially fast, like just so much faster than it ever was for anyone that came before us. So I feel like looking at it, like you got a 5-week-old son, right? You have a son.
Yep.
Your son, like that, when he's 15, 16, it's like going to be crazy. Like my 8-year-old daughter with AI and with all the advancements, like you said, voice and all these new technologies, I feel like things are going way faster, and people do need to adapt. I feel like this is the time for ideas too. People who have something like, oh, wow, this is a great idea. Like it's time. These ideas are flourishing now more than ever. So I'm with you. I feel like being home, being, kind of secluded and being forced to stay home, people's brains are thinking, okay, is this the new norm? If it is, how is it going to change things for the worker of the future, for convenience? So I totally agree there. I feel like there's going to be, a change to make things. We're an instant gratification society.
And Frank, bro, I'm so disappointed, man, that we don't have FaceTime on the Apple Watch yet. Like seriously, Apple, come on.
Yeah.
Really? We can't do that yet? You can do
Yeah.
it on a screen this big, but you can't do it on a little screen? Where's that update? Let's
Yeah.
get it.
So I'm sure things are, yeah, that's just going to happen so fast, and the demand will continue to rise. So cool, man. Hey, it's been just so awesome to having you on, really sharing your backstory, giving us some advice there, and some things that we're seeing, that you're seeing out there. Anything you want to leave the audience with? We'd love to know if they want to check out your podcast. How are they finding that? I know you're very active on LinkedIn, so if you can let us know where to find you, and I'll drop it in the show notes, of course. But that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you can follow me on LinkedIn. I about 3 weeks ago I reached the 30K connection mark. So for anyone that doesn't know, LinkedIn maxes your first level at 30,000, and then from there, people can still send you requests, but you can't accept them unless you remove somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find me on LinkedIn, Jordan J Mendoza, you can follow me. I'm happy to follow you back. And if a connection happens to be removed and you're next in line, you can get in. I feel really bad about that. I don't know if you've seen that, Frank, but like your inbox just gets flooded, and there's not a whole lot you can do besides message people back and tell them you're sorry,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, LinkedIn's a great place. I love creating content there. I'm on Instagram at Jordan J Mendoza. You can find my podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. It's Blaze Your Own Trail podcast. And I really appreciate it, Frank. Thanks for having me on the show. Anytime I can share my story and hopefully add value, I'm happy to do it.
You did exactly that. I appreciate it so much, man. Thanks again.
Thanks, buddy.